Have you ever had that one call, the one you can't forget? The night everything seemed normal, until the sobbing began. Let me tell you about the case that still makes me question what hides just beyond the shadows we trust. Every cop has at least one story they can't fully explain. A suspect who vanishes without a trace, whispers over dispatch that shouldn't exist, or strange shapes lurking just beyond camera footage. You won't find these stories filed away neatly in official reports. No, they're shared quietly during late-night shifts, the kind that makes even the hardest officer glance nervously over their shoulder. So listen carefully, and judge for yourself what's true. It started off ordinary, just another routine domestic disturbance call. At least, that's what I initially thought. Sure, the dispatcher's voice sounded a little tense, but nothing alarming enough to raise red flags. Possible argument, possible violence at 1185 Kensington, Unit 4B. She'd informed us plainly. Easy enough. Kensington wasn't exactly my usual beat, but I knew the area. Worn-down buildings that seemed to sag under years of neglect, home to folks who'd been there far too long. It wasn't the type of place you'd normally associate with major trouble, but that's how trouble always works, isn't it? Sneaking up when you least expect it. We pulled up outside, a brick building, cracks spreading across its weathered facade, windows covered with faded curtains bleached nearly white from relentless sunlight. The gentle buzz of street traffic hummed beneath us, oblivious to whatever awaited inside. Officer Carter shot me a questioning glance as we stepped from the cruiser. Think it's just another lover's spat? He asked, adjusting his cap. I shrugged, unsure. There was a nagging feeling inside me that something wasn't quite right. Maybe, I said noncommittally. Maybe not. We reached the apartment door, knocked twice, and called out our presence. Nothing. A second round of knocking brought the same eerie silence. Then I caught it, voices, faint and indistinct, floating softly through the thin walls. They sounded strangely distant, like echoes carried from someplace far away. Stevens and I exchanged a quick look, and I decided right then. Let's force it, I said quietly. Something about the unusual silence clawed at my nerves. Normally, domestic calls were loud, chaotic, filled with shouting. This was different, strangely subdued, muffled. Hollow. Stevens nodded in agreement, and together we broke down the door. The lock shattered easily, and we stepped cautiously into the apartment. Immediately I noticed how silent it was, far too silent. The apartment was simple enough. Old, worn furniture, neatly arranged and clean. Framed family photos lined the walls, and on the coffee table, 2 cups, one knocked sideways, spilled coffee dried long ago. Everything seemed perfectly normal. Almost too normal. Police! I called out, scanning the empty space cautiously. Is anyone here? You okay? No reply. Then it came, a quiet noise at first, barely audible. A soft, childlike sobbing. It started small, a gentle weeping, but didn't fade away. Instead, it stayed steady, rhythmic and relentless. I felt my pulse quicken. Stevens, I whispered, my throat suddenly dry. You hearing this? Yeah, he answered stiffly, hand already hovering near his holster, eyes scanning every shadow. It's here somewhere. But I don't see anyone. The crying grew clearer now. Louder. It was coming from the back bedroom, down the darkened hallway. Step by careful step, we moved closer. Each footfall matched the rising desperation in those sobs. Yet the apartment still looked untouched. No sign anyone had fought, no clear proof anyone even lived here. With a trembling hand I nudged open the bedroom door, half expecting chaos. But it was empty. Just scattered clothing and an old, dusty mattress. Still, the crying intensified, sharp and urgent, as though whoever it was, they were right here. Where the hell is that coming from? Stevens whispered tensely behind me, disbelief coloring his voice. My flashlight danced over peeling wallpaper, an empty closet, then landed on a small window half blocked by blinds. Something moved at the edge of my vision. Something in the corner of the room. My heart nearly stopped. There, sitting hunched over, facing away from us, was a small figure. Its thin shoulders trembled rhythmically, as though cradling something close. Frozen in place, I stared. It was a woman, or at least it appeared to be, long, dark gown pulled around her, unkempt hair cascading messily down her back. She remained completely still except for the rhythmic shudder of her sobs. "Ma'am?" My voice shook as I spoke. Are you okay?" No response. Just continuous sobbing. Each step I took toward her seemed heavier, my gut twisting with dread. Slowly, hesitantly, I reached out and lightly touched her shoulder. In that instant, everything stopped. Silence engulfed us, thick and oppressive. Then, as though waking from some horrible trance, the figure began turning toward me, agonizingly slow. And when it faced me, the scream in my throat caught, choking off any sound. Because the face staring blankly back at me, it wasn't human. Not anymore. A twisted mockery of a face, empty sockets gaped where eyes should have been, black and hollow. Her mouth stretched grotesquely wide in silent agony, skin pale, dripping some slick substance onto the floor beneath. This wasn't a woman, this was something monstrous. My breath came short, panic clawing inside me. Stevens shouted something behind me, but his words didn't reach my ears. My entire focus was fixed on the grotesque being in front of me. Slowly, horribly, it stretched out elongated hands, fingers unnaturally thin and sharp, like claws reaching for me. But before those terrible hands could make contact, the sobbing returned. This time louder, sharper, unmistakable, coming from directly behind me. And as I spun around toward the sound, nothing was there, just the emptiness of the hallway we'd come from. When I turned back again, the creature had vanished, leaving nothing behind but deafening silence, and a memory burned into my mind. That sobbing never truly left me. It followed us out into the halls, through the elevator shaft, even down to the street. It lingers still, echoing through my nightmares. And the woman, if that's what she ever was, I doubt she ever truly left. That haunting, desperate crying can still be heard, faintly echoing in dark places just like this one, waiting patiently. If you're quiet enough, you might just hear it too. Did you ever hear something so haunting it followed you home? I never believed in ghosts until the sobbing from that empty room echoed in my dreams. But that night was just the beginning of what I can't explain even now. The sobbing suddenly grew louder, now clearly behind me in the hallway. I spun quickly, heart racing, but the hallway was still completely empty. Turning back to the figure, I felt a jolt run through me. It had vanished without a trace. The room was exactly as empty as when we'd first entered, yet the crying hadn't stopped. Instead, it drifted away, growing faint, echoing as if it moved deeper within the building. My body felt frozen in place, the shock stealing my voice. Stevens was already retreating toward the doorway, face ghostly pale, hands trembling. He didn't need to say anything. His eyes said it all. We both heard the sobbing, now faint and distant, as if something unseen was slowly retreating deeper inside, drawing us into its mystery. We got out of there fast. Out of the room, out of the apartment, practically sprinting from the building itself. But that sobbing, it followed us, echoing persistently through the halls, winding down the stairwell, filling the emptiness of the elevator shaft like some living, breathing presence chasing us away. We never spoke about it again. Years have passed, but occasionally I'll still hear that mournful sobbing when everything else goes quiet. It's a sound you can't forget, something that burrows into your mind. You can't erase something like that. You can't unsee what we saw. As for the woman in the gown, I'm convinced she's still there. That crying still hides quietly in dark corners of buildings like that one. Maybe you'll hear it too someday if you're ever quiet enough, brave enough, to listen. It was a bitter, unsettling night, the kind that steals your breath as soon as you step outside the cruiser. Few people even remembered the old asylum anymore, a crumbling relic on the outskirts of town. Doors sealed tight for decades, windows boarded, stories of disturbing events passed off as urban legends. But in my line of work, you learn quickly that sometimes legends have a way of coming true. That's why I wasn't surprised when a call came in reporting a trespasser at the abandoned Hillcrest Asylum. Pulling up to the rusted gates, I felt immediately that something was wrong here. In person, the place looked worse, like it had waited patiently for someone to come back, to acknowledge it again after years of silence. But I didn't have the luxury of hesitation. My radio crackled again, a terse reminder: trespasser reported on site. Who in their right mind would willingly visit a place like this? Still, duty's duty, and I happened to be nearby. Shivering slightly against the biting wind, I approached the entrance gate cautiously. The broken padlock immediately raised alarms. It shouldn't have been open. I hadn't expected that. Stepping past the threshold, dried leaves crunched beneath my boots, mixed with shards of broken glass scattered like forgotten memories. Silence cloaked the building, a heavy, suffocating quiet. Then, suddenly, a faint sound echoed ahead. A footstep? Someone definitely moved just beyond those rusted doors leading deeper inside. My hand instinctively grabbed for my flashlight, though pale moonlight leaking through broken windows gave enough illumination to make out the cracked tiles, peeling walls, and desolate rooms stretching endlessly ahead. I took a deep breath and called out loudly, authority masking unease. "This is Officer Brooks. I know you're here. Come out, make this easy." The sound of panicked footsteps answered me immediately, quick and desperate. Someone was trying to escape, hoping to vanish before I found them. A surge of adrenaline kicked in. I wasn't ready for this. Why here? Why tonight? I chased after the fleeing shadow, boots pounding against cold concrete. The asylum was a maze of winding hallways, corridors twisting into impossible shapes, almost pushing me further inside with each step. But determination pushed me forward. I had to know who this was. Rounding a corner sharply, I glimpsed a shadowy figure slipping into a room at the far end. "Stop!" I shouted, voice echoing fiercely. "There's nowhere left to go!" Rushing to the door, pulse hammering in my ears, I threw it open, only to find emptiness staring back at me. Yet something lingered, a heavy, oppressive feeling in the air, as if I'd just missed something crucial. Sweeping my flashlight beam over broken furniture, shattered glass, and decades-old dust, it felt like nobody had stepped foot here in years. But the chill in this room was unnatural, its silence deeper than I'd ever experienced before, as though something inside had woken up, waiting patiently just for me. Have you ever felt something ancient watching you, waiting behind a door that's been locked for decades? That night, the soft click of an old bolt changed my life, plunging me into darkness that whispered secrets I was never meant to uncover. And then I heard it. A faint, barely audible noise, a quiet click, almost like metal sliding against metal. Was it a lock? A latch releasing somewhere behind me? Slowly I turned, flashlight trembling slightly in my grip. Its beam landed on a heavy wooden door at the far end of the room. Unlike everything else, it seemed intact, as though untouched by the years of decay around it. This door didn't have the usual padlock that sealed away most rooms here, but it was firmly bolted shut, like it guarded secrets no one wanted revealed. Something felt deeply wrong about it, like whatever lay behind had been patiently waiting, sealed away with memories better left forgotten. I stepped closer cautiously, straining my ears. My breath hitched as I caught a faint sound coming from behind the door, soft, labored breathing. Someone, or something, was inside. "Who's there?" My voice quivered despite my efforts to keep it steady. Only silence answered. My fingers reached tentatively toward the bolt. But before I could touch it, footsteps shuffled softly behind me. My heart jumped as I spun around sharply, shining the flashlight. There it was again, a fleeting blur, a shadow darting into darkness, vanishing before my eyes could catch any detail. Frustration surged through me. Who was playing this game? What was their reason? Every instinct screamed at me to get out, to leave the asylum and its secrets buried behind those crumbling walls. But something stronger compelled me to stay, a need to uncover the truth. Just then, the rusty bolt on the door moved with a harsh squeal, slowly sliding open from the other side. The figure was suddenly gone, vanished as quickly as it appeared. I rushed toward the door, gripping the handle desperately, only to find it locked again, as if mocking my attempts to understand. This room hadn't been entered in decades, yet something had just been inside. Waiting. Fueled by sheer adrenaline, I slammed my shoulder into the door until it finally gave way, stumbling into pitch-black darkness. This wasn't normal darkness. It felt heavy, oppressive, like a physical force pressing down on my chest. I struggled to steady my breathing, fighting the rising panic. The silence in this room felt different, alive, as if every wall, every shadow watched my every move. Carefully, flashlight shaking, I moved deeper inside. The beam cut through the darkness, landing on something hidden away in the far corner, a pile of old books, papers, dust-covered memories. And something else. Something wrapped carefully in old, yellowed cloth. As I approached, my pulse raced faster, dread pooling in my chest. My heart froze when I saw clearly, a small wooden crate hidden away, forgotten but obviously important. This felt like a container for secrets. Personal items buried to keep the past safely locked away. I reached out, fingers barely grazing the rough surface, when suddenly footsteps sounded behind me again. I spun around in panic, but nothing was there. A deafening slam shattered the silence. The door behind me had closed. Locked. Trapped. I frantically pulled at the handle, but it didn't budge. The walls seemed to close in as the crate, sitting silently in the shadows, suddenly felt like it held answers to everything: the trespasser, the footsteps, this overwhelming sense of dread. Time slowed as panic gripped me, air growing thicker by the second. Then, as though the building itself was finally releasing a long-held breath, the lock gave way. The door swung open, and I practically fell backward into the corridor, gasping desperately, my lungs hungry for fresh air. The footsteps, the presence, all gone without a trace. I never did discover who, or what, waited in that room. But something still lives there, hidden behind doors that shouldn't open. Whatever secrets lie in that darkness, they weren't finished with me, not yet. As I fled the asylum that night, I knew I'd left behind more than unanswered questions. Something from that place followed me, waiting silently until it's ready to be found again. There are some calls you can't shake, calls that twist your gut and make you question your own instincts. The night I'm talking about was quiet, almost unnaturally still, like everything moved in slow motion. Nothing unusual, just routine patrol out on Highway 47. That stretch of road cuts straight through empty fields and thick woods for miles. No gas stations, restaurants, or signs of life. Just darkness and silence, broken occasionally by the rumble of distant trucks. Officer Reed was riding with me that night. He was quiet, reserved, the type of guy who kept his head down, did his job, and ignored anything strange. Usually, I was the same. But sometimes, the air changes, and you sense you're about to encounter something you won't be able to explain. We just finished a routine report when we spotted her, a young woman standing by the road near the old bridge. You know the one, the bridge locals whisper stories about, calling it haunted, cursed, or just unsettlingly eerie. The kind of place nobody lingers, especially not alone, at night. Ever pick up a hitchhiker who vanished without a trace? I have. On a road no one stops at, near a bridge everyone fears, I met a girl who disappeared, and took something with her. Something we never got back. She was young, early 20s, standing at the roadside in a faded jacket, thumb raised like she'd been waiting hours for a ride. I glanced at Reed, eyebrows raised. "You see her?" "Yeah," he replied quietly, tapping the brakes and pulling over. "Probably someone got stranded." Our cruiser rolled to a stop on the gravel shoulder. Without hesitation, she opened the back door, slid into the seat silently, and slammed the door shut. She didn't look scared, just worn down, like she'd been waiting forever for someone to stop. Through the rearview mirror, I caught a quick glimpse of her face, pale, exhausted, hair messy as though she hadn't slept in days. Yet nothing suggested she was in danger, just stranded and weary. Turning slightly, I asked, "Where you headed?" She didn't respond. Her eyes stared blankly ahead, fixed on some invisible point beyond the windshield. Reed shot me a sideways glance, shrugging slightly. "Maybe she's too tired to talk," he whispered. I nodded silently, turning back around. Some folks preferred quiet, especially at night. We drove without speaking, the hum of the engine filling the awkward silence. Soon, we approached the old bridge, the one with all those whispered stories, the one place that always felt off. I felt my stomach tighten as we crossed, glancing instinctively into the rearview mirror. My blood ran cold. The back seat was empty. Completely empty. I hadn't heard a sound, not even the smallest noise of a door opening or closing. But she was gone. Vanished. I slammed the brakes, tires skidding on asphalt, heart pounding wildly. Reed jolted forward, gripping the dashboard instinctively. "What the hell, man?" he shouted, alarmed, reaching for his sidearm. "What's going on? You didn't see that?" I turned frantically toward the empty back seat. The girl. She was right there. She just disappeared. Reed scanned the empty space, confusion clouding his face. "What girl? Maybe she jumped out somehow when we weren't looking." But I knew better. I knew exactly what I'd seen. A person can't just disappear into thin air. I backed up quickly, headlights sweeping desperately around the bridge area. There was nothing, no tracks, no signs anyone had ever been there. Finally, Reed sighed, breaking the heavy silence. "Let's head back. You're imagining things." I didn't respond. I couldn't. I knew what had happened was impossible, yet I knew what I'd seen. It didn't end that night, though. A week later, I was on patrol again, same stretch, different partner. Officer McKinley was beside me, quietly finishing paperwork, when I saw her again. Same girl. Same jacket. Same thumb raised by that same damn bridge. This time, I didn't hesitate. I pulled over immediately. Hayes hardly looked up, casually opening the back door. "You need a ride?" I called, my voice tight. She didn't answer. Silently, just like before, she climbed into the cruiser, slamming the door shut. My pulse quickened, nerves already frayed. I drove forward slowly, dread thickening the air. As we approached the bridge, my stomach clenched. I didn't even glance back. I already knew. Brakes slammed. Tires squealed. Hayes grabbed at his seatbelt, startled. "What the hell's going on?" he shouted, panicked. I twisted around, confirming what my gut had already told me. Empty. The back seat was completely empty again. Hayes stared at me, eyes wide with disbelief. "Where'd she go, man?" I had no answer, just confusion swirling inside me. We reversed, searching every inch around that bridge, finding nothing. No girl. No evidence she'd ever existed. Sitting there, engine humming softly beneath the night sky, Hayes finally broke the silence, voice shaking. "You think we're getting pranked or something?" I shook my head, hands gripping the wheel tightly. "No. I've driven this road too often. Something's off here." And it didn't stop. It happened again, this time with Officer Lawson. Same girl. Same silent entry. Same disappearance. But Phillips didn't let it go. He got out, flashlight sweeping, determined to find answers. That was the last time we ever saw him. Gone, without any trace, no explanation, no clues left behind. Rumors spread quickly after Phillips vanished. Some said it was the ghost of a girl who died near that bridge. Others whispered about darker things, creatures lurking just beyond our understanding. All I know is, we never stopped for her again. But sometimes, on foggy nights when the headlights flicker and shadows shift, I swear I still see her, standing quietly by the roadside, thumb out, waiting patiently for someone else to stop. Ever answered a call you wish you hadn't? As a dispatcher, I thought I'd heard everything, until the night a frantic voice trapped in an abandoned house turned silence into a nightmare I'll never escape. This isn't a call you forget easily. I honestly don't know what to believe anymore. After that night, none of us ever picked up that girl again. Not even once. Still, every time I drive past that bridge I think of her. Especially on foggy nights, when the headlights flicker strangely, I swear I still see her standing there, waiting quietly by the roadside. But I've learned better. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. Some things are happier left unexplained. And that girl on Highway 47? She's one of those mysteries. Being a 911 dispatcher for years, you get used to calls having a certain rhythm. Someone speaks, you respond, and urgency guides your actions. But every once in a while, a call shatters all sense of pattern and leaves you changed forever. This call was exactly that kind. It was just past midnight, and the shift was eerily quiet. I sat there, watching seconds tick by, almost hoping for something to break the silence. Routine test calls from officers checking in buzzed occasionally, nothing unusual. Then suddenly, the line rang. I answered instinctively. 911, what's your emergency? At first, silence, just heavy, shaky breathing. A chill prickled my spine. Something felt immediately wrong. Hello? I tried again. Ma'am, are you there? Finally, her voice erupted, frantic, trembling with fear and desperation. They're in the house, she sobbed. Oh God, they're inside. Please help me. Adrenaline shot through me, and I struggled to keep my tone steady, calming. All right, ma'am, stay calm. Can you give me your address? Her voice broke into panicked sobs. I don't know. It's an old house. It's big, abandoned. They're coming closer. Oh no, they're climbing the stairs now. Please hurry. Then the line abruptly died. Not a click, no static, just complete, unnerving silence. The call remained open, a dead emptiness stretching endlessly through the phone. Heart hammering, I dispatched the nearest patrol unit immediately, Officers Matthews and Garcia. They were only a few blocks from the address on file, but something about this didn't add up. That woman's voice had sounded desperate, but something deeper lingered beneath, like it wasn't just intruders she feared. More like something was keeping her trapped inside, something far darker. Minutes later, Matthew's voice crackled through the radio, uncertain. Dispatch, we're on site. The place looks empty, no lights, no sign anyone's lived here in years. Confusion clouded my thoughts. You're sure? Records show it's abandoned. Matthews cut me off sharply, his voice low, tense. It's definitely empty, but something doesn't feel right. The officers entered cautiously, footsteps echoing hollowly through my headset. I listened helplessly as Matthews and Garcia's breathing quickened, tension evident in every step. Dispatch, Matthews reported again, unease thick in his voice. There's nothing here, no furniture, no signs of life. But it's weird. We're hearing whispers. A chill spread through me. Whispers? What do you mean? Garcia interrupted quietly, voice shaking slightly. Voices, dispatch. Soft, like someone talking but too quiet to understand. Wait, Matthews, look. There's a phone here. I froze, blood cold. A phone? It's on the floor. Matthews whispered back, disbelief creeping into his tone. How is this even possible? It's warm. My heart thundered. You didn't see a phone earlier? No, Garcia replied, panic rising. Dispatch, we gotta get out now. I shouted into the mic, voice trembling. Leave immediately. Something isn't right. But the line dissolved into static, cutting off my desperate warning. Silence filled my headset. I screamed their names, pleading into empty airwaves, but there was nothing but static. Have you ever heard a voice you couldn't forget, one that reaches you long after it's gone silent? The night my officers vanished into a house that wouldn't let them leave, I realized some calls never end. They just wait patiently. My heart thundered in my ears. I had no idea what was happening, but I felt it, a shift in the air itself, like reality had suddenly slipped out of place. Minutes passed, and every second felt agonizing. Then, without warning, the officer's radio crackled back to life. We're out. We're. Matthew's voice trailed off, distant, strained. Dispatch, we're outside now, but there's something you need to know. My throat tightened. Matthews. I stammered, anxiety spilling through my voice. What happened? Where's the phone? The woman. Did you find her? But before he could respond, the radio fell silent again, dead silence stretching out unbearably long. I waited, desperation clawing at me, praying they'd answer again. Finally, after what felt like forever, Matthew's radio flickered on once more, but it wasn't Matthews speaking. It wasn't Garcia either. It was her, the terrified woman from before. Yet something had changed. Her voice was different now, hollow, distant, as though drifting from somewhere impossibly far away. "I'm still here," she whispered, hauntingly calm. "Please help me. They won't leave. They won't let me go. This house, it won't let me leave." Cold dread filled my veins. She'd never hung up. Her voice lingered, trapped in static, refusing to let go. Panicked, I scrambled to reach Matthews and Garcia, shouting into the radio, desperate for a response. Nothing. Silence swallowed everything again. Then, after another minute of silence, the line burst to life with a different voice. "Dispatch," the newcomer said flatly, sounding numb, shell-shocked. "This is Officer Chandler. We found their cruiser, but Matthews and Garcia, they're gone." My heart nearly stopped. "Gone? Warren, what do you mean gone? Where did they go?" His voice was hollow, haunted by something he couldn't explain. "Don't ask me that. I don't know. Something about this house isn't right. It's like it swallowed them. Like they disappeared inside the walls." The line clicked, went dead, and didn't reconnect this time. Eventually, the place was sealed off. No one could ever explain what really happened, not the call, the warm phone on the floor, or how 2 trained officers vanished without a trace. And me? I still lie awake at night, haunted by one question: who called, and why? Some calls you never truly leave behind. They stay with you, forever whispering their mystery into the darkness. And sometimes, when everything else fades into silence, I swear I still hear her voice drifting softly through static. I'm still here. There are certain things you witness that never sit right, moments that force you to question your own eyes and sanity. Places, too, places that, no matter how often you're there, never lose their unsettling grip. The precinct was exactly that kind of place. I'd been working night shifts there for years, and let me tell you, the hours between midnight and dawn do strange things to your mind. Hallways seemed longer, air thicker, silence deeper. Most nights you could shake it off, blame it on exhaustion and move on. But not this time. This was different, impossible to ignore. It started roughly 2 weeks back, just another quiet late shift. Officer Mercer was at the front desk, busy filling out paperwork. I was stationed near the holding cells, checking on a handful of minor offenders who'd be out by morning. The clock ticked slowly toward 3 a.m., and that unnatural quiet had settled in. The hum of fluorescent lights, occasional echoes from the cells, nothing else. Then, something caught my eye. A shadow darted quickly across the hallway near the back cells. It wasn't human, too quick, too fluid. Just a brief blur, tall and impossibly thin, slipping in and out of sight instantly. My pulse quickened, eyes scanning for answers. A trick of the lights, maybe? A mouse darting past? But then it moved again, clearer now, darting swiftly between cells, as though checking on the prisoners. I stood slowly, cautiously approaching. "Jameson?" I called softly, not wanting to alarm him, yet needing reassurance. "You seeing this? Have you ever seen something lurking where nothing should be?" Late nights at the precinct showed me shadows can watch, whisper, even follow. Let me tell you about the night I realized our station had secrets darker than the cells inside. "Did you see that?" I asked Jameson urgently. He looked up slowly from his paperwork, eyebrows furrowing. "See what?" "That shadow in the hallway," I insisted. "It just slipped between the cells, like it was watching them." Jameson studied me cautiously, then rose to his feet with a skeptical sigh. "Could have been the lights. You know how they flicker. Or maybe we're both just too tired." I tried to push away the creeping unease, nodding half-heartedly. "Maybe. But this was different, too quick, almost deliberate." We stood silently, waiting, eyes trained down the dimly lit corridor. The precinct had fallen into an unnatural stillness, heavy with anticipation. Then it happened again. A fleeting dark blur darted swiftly past the cells. "You see it now?" I whispered, cold sweat prickling at my neck. Jameson narrowed his eyes, confused and hesitant. No. I still don't see anything. Frustrated, we hurried to check the security footage. Nothing unusual showed up. The recordings were clear, showing only empty hallways and quiet cells. The shadow hadn't been captured. It was as if whatever I saw couldn't be recorded, didn't want to be seen. I swear it's real, I muttered, irritation mixing with fear. It keeps showing up, always right when things get quiet. Jameson rubbed his forehead, clearly unsettled but trying to hide it. Look, maybe we just need some rest. Long shifts can mess with your head. Let's take a break. I nodded reluctantly, but deep down I knew it wasn't exhaustion causing these visions. Something genuinely felt off. Over the next few nights, it continued happening. That shadow would appear randomly, sometimes rushing silently between cells, sometimes just standing still at the far end of the hallway, watching, waiting. And every time we reviewed security footage, it showed nothing unusual, clean, clear, perfectly ordinary. But we'd seen it, felt it. It wasn't something we could forget. Jameson started getting jumpy, though he'd never admit it. He'd glance down the hallways nervously, double-check doors he'd already locked, anxiously fiddling with his keys. Eventually, he locked the front desk door, clearly uneasy. Truth is, I was doing the same. Neither of us spoke about it openly, but the station had become oppressive, filled with tension that wouldn't break. One night, everything finally unraveled. I was alone near the holding cells, finishing up paperwork, when a faint tapping caught my ear. Soft at first, barely noticeable, then gradually louder, steady, deliberate tapping against the metal bars. Heart racing, I glanced up sharply. The shadow was back, clearer now, standing motionless in front of one of the cells. Its form was unsettling, tall, stretched unnaturally thin, distorted and clearly not human. It stood there silently, radiating an overwhelming sense of wrongness. My breathing quickened. Instinctively, I moved closer, but the instant I stepped forward, it vanished like smoke dissolving into thin air. Shaken, pulse hammering, I froze in place. Jameson! I shouted into my radio, voice trembling with urgency. Get over here now! No response. Just silence. Panicked, I rushed back to the front desk, only to find it deserted. No Jameson, no sign of anyone. Empty. Then the tapping returned, softer now, almost whispering from the cells behind me. Heart pounding painfully, I turned slowly and saw him standing at the hallway's end, Jameson, pale, eyes glazed and distant, fixed rigidly on something I couldn't see. Jameson? I called, stepping toward him carefully. But he didn't move, didn't blink, frozen like a statue. I reached out, gripping his arm firmly. Hey man, we gotta get out of here! Jameson flinched violently at my touch, spinning to face me, terror twisting his features. Don't, he hissed, voice raw with fear. Don't look at it. It's not what you think. Instinctively, I turned toward the shadow, desperate to understand. Before I could see clearly, the station lights flickered wildly, and a heavy slam echoed behind us, the main doors locking tight, sealing us inside. A voice then whispered from nowhere, low, guttural, vibrating through my skull more than through the air. Leave. Now. Panic surged through me. I grabbed Jameson, pulling him urgently toward the locked door, feeling the shadow's oppressive presence following, closing in around us. It wasn't just in the hallway anymore. It had filled every corner, every breath we took. We were trapped. Hours later, when we finally escaped, we barely spoke, unwilling, or unable, to talk about what we'd experienced. Jameson wouldn't even look at me. We both knew something irreversible had happened that night. Something had changed forever in that station, something that couldn't be undone. We never saw the shadow again after that night. But even now, passing that building, I feel eyes watching me from within, waiting patiently in the dark. Because some shadows never really fade, they simply follow.